Maybe you didn't know this. There is kind of a ghost story in the Bible. This is one of the weirdest stories in the Bible. I'm just going to say that. It's a very strange one. I'm not sure always what to do with it. But we're going to go through it tonight as part of, we've been looking at, for the past few weeks, the relationship between Samuel and Saul. Two characters in the Bible. Saul was the king. Samuel was the prophet. Samuel was the one who found Saul and said, Saul, you be the next king. And everyone was really excited. And he started off very well. Over time, he kind of turned into a jerk. He did some really bad things, just to be honest. He did some really bad things. And this is kind of the end of the Samuel and Saul story. Now, the thing that makes this story in the Bible so weird and different is that Samuel has actually been dead for some time when this story happens. Samuel, remember last week whenever we talked about how Saul was supposed to wipe out these people who were bad, and he didn't do it, and he came up with all these excuses why he didn't do it. You guys remember that? Well, after that happened, it said that Samuel never talked to Saul again after that. Until the day that he died, he never went back and talked to Saul. But what actually happened was they had a conversation after Samuel died. So that's where we are for tonight. I'm going to start reading here. You guys can follow along, and then I'll talk about the verses as we go through them. The Philistines assembled and came up and set up camp at Shunem, while Saul gathered all Israel and set up camp at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine army, he was afraid, and terror filled his heart. And he inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams or Urim or prophets. And Saul said to his attendants, "Find me a woman who is a medium, so I may go and inquire of her." And there is one in En Dor, they said. So Saul wants an answer. He's worried because these people are like congregating, and these are bad people, and he's worried. And so he goes to God. But God and Saul are like not on speaking terms. They're not getting along right now because of all the bad stuff Saul has done. It said God's not even going to respond to what Saul is asking. So instead of just repenting and coming to God like fresh and new, instead Saul goes to what's called a medium. You guys ever heard of that? A lot of time today, people call them psychics. Kind of the same thing, though. And the Bible talks about them a lot. It always says that's a forbidden practice. That's something that you're not supposed to talk to people who do that. You're not supposed to try to do that yourself because I'll tell you why. It's dangerous. It actually carries pretty severe penalties in the Bible. And I know that if it was just something that was harmless, because people might say, well, it's just for fun, or it's something harmless, well, then the Bible wouldn't make such a big deal about it. But it's actually not something that's harmless. It's actually something very serious. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit tonight. Notice that Saul asks for a woman. He says, find me a woman who's a psychic. And just a second. I was going to say, isn't that kind of interesting how in the Bible, all the psychics or mediums or whatever were women. Isn't that always true today too? Yeah. Like, if you ever see a psychic, it's always a woman. I think that's interesting. But you know what? Things don't usually change over time as far as like what spirits do, what evil spirits do. I don't know why they choose women to work through in that way. But it's interesting because it's like those things don't change even over time, even over thousands of years. So a psychic or a medium, that's one thing that they could do is tell you your future. You know, that's one thing that they try to do a lot. And like you guys have heard the joke, you never see a headline that says a psychic won the lottery, right? They never can guess the lottery numbers. But anyway, that's one thing that they try to do. Sometimes they will try to talk to people who've died. And this is where it gets kind of like, are they really talking to people who died, or are they just talking to what I'd say like demons pretending to be people who died? That's what I think it is pretty much any time. One way that they try to do that, you guys ever see things at stores called Ouija boards? Yeah. I'm not sure how to spell it. It's like starts with an O. That's one thing you want to stay away from. And what's weird is that they put it in the game aisle at the store because it looks like a board game. You know, it's like a kind of a board. It's got letters all over it. It looks kind of like a board game or some sort of game that you would play, and I guess that's why they stick it in the board game aisle. The thing is, it's not even a game. Like, it's something that people use to try to talk to ghosts or try to talk to demons or whatever. They have different things to try to do. I knew a girl in college, and she got on, she would just talk about it. I got on the Ouija board with my friends, and I didn't even know what one was. I was 17 at the time. I'm like, what is that even? And so she explained it to me, Even though I didn't know what it was, I knew right away like it was some sort of demonic thing, because they will put this little slider thing on the board, and it'll move around on its own and spell things out and talk to them. And I told her, well, listen, I mean, that's obviously something spiritual. I mean, she was totally okay with it. She's like, I'm talking to my guardian. That's what she said. And I'm like, your guardian? And she said, yeah, he told me that he's my guardian, and he told me what color. I mean, I'm just telling you what she said. This is not like stuff that's even in the Bible. I guess there's the angels and stuff in the Bible, but she said it was my guardian, my spirit guardian, and he told her what color her aura was. I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? And she told me all this weird stuff, but she's totally serious about it. And the thing is, there's nothing about auras and guardians. It's just demons messing with people. Just to be honest, that's what it is. It's she just had this really casual attitude about it. And I even said to her, why did they put these Ouija board things in the game aisle? And she's like, I don't know, because they're not games. It's real stuff. Even though she thought it was okay and I thought it was wrong, both of us were like, what is this doing in game aisles? So it's not a game. It is a for real thing. And people will try to talk to demons. That's what she was doing. She was like trying to talk to them. And she's like, I said, listen, I think it's a dangerous thing you shouldn't do. And she's like, well, I know it's risky, but I just really want to know my future, and I really want to know what's going on that I can't see. And our guide should not be a Ouija board for anything. Our guide should be the Bible. That should be what we use to figure out what we want to do in life. We don't need to talk to a guardian. I still don't even know what that was supposed to be, if she meant guardian angel or what. But it was not Christian. It was not true stuff. So stay away from those kind of things, because they're dangerous. I'm telling you that for your own good. I'll go on through the story because I want to get through this. Yeah, I could spend a lot of time on that, but there's another part I want to talk about tonight. So Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes, because he didn't want anyone to know who he was whenever he was going to this woman. And at night he and two men went to the woman. Consult a spirit for me, he said, and bring up for me the one I name. But the woman said to him, surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off the mediums and spiritists from the land. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death? Saul swore to her by the Lord, as surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this. So Saul had kicked him out a long time ago. And that's why she's like, why are you trying to talk to me about that stuff? You know that Saul the king has forbidden that, and he is Saul the king. He's like, it's okay. She says, as surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this. The woman says, whom shall I bring up for you? And he said, bring up Samuel. So what he's wanting to do is he's wanting to talk to Samuel for advice. And there's lots of times that we wish we could talk to people, even people who've died, and get their advice. You're like, I wonder what they would say about this right now. Like, I do understand that desire that people would have. Anytime someone dies that you really loved, you always wish you could have one more conversation, right? No matter how many times you talk to them, you wish you could have one more. So I get that. But anyway, what he's doing here is the wrong way to go about it. But when it comes to asking advice, that's something I did want to... I've been looking for a time to talk about this, and I thought, well, this would be a good time. When it comes to asking advice, that is something you guys should do. Like, I think sometimes we're afraid to ask advice for stuff because we're like, if I ask for advice on something, I'm going to look stupid if I'm asking for help. I think that's the attitude that we have sometimes. But the thing is, I promise you, never once thought someone looked stupid for asking for help. Now, a lot of people have looked stupid because they wanted to ask for help and they tried to do stuff on their own and they messed up. I've done that. I've looked stupid doing that. Trying to figure it out on my own way. Asking advice is a good thing. Like Pastor John was saying on Sunday, if you were here, the older you get, the smarter your parents seem to be, because you realize how much stuff your parents know. And that's really true. And I'd just say, listen to your elders. I think, has anyone ever helped an old person with, a cell phone or a computer or something like that? They need help with that. And sometimes we can just feel like, wow, I know so much more than them. But listen, just because you know how to work a cell phone or a computer, and they don't, they can give you really good advice, who to marry, if you should get married, what's a good time, go to college, what kind of job should I get, this or that job. They can still give you really good advice on all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's why you got to be careful when you reply to mass texts. There's one time I got blindsided by technology because I think I was messaging Hannah, and I was using my phone, and I sent a picture on my phone, And then it said on the thing, send, and I clicked send, and then I realized it was still taking pictures and sending more pictures. And I sent her a picture of my foot. And I'm I was just sitting there at my computer. I'm like, okay, I hit send again, and it took a picture of my sock and sent it to her. Just did it like that. I'm like, whoa. I feel like the old person who's can't keep up with this stuff. Okay. But listen, it'll be really easy for you guys to just say, well, I'll figure out how to buy a car on my own. I'll figure out if I want a house or an apartment on my own. You can do those things on your own, but it is really wise to ask advice of people who are older than you, who've been through that kind of thing. Don't be too prideful. Don't just try to do it on your own and miss out on that opportunity to get someone else's wisdom and knowledge who's been through those kind of things. Another thing is be careful who you ask advice from, because one thing you guys probably figured out, everyone loves to give you advice. Even when you don't ask for it, people just love to tell you what to do, and that doesn't really go away. But be careful who you take advice from, because I'd say take advice from somebody who is in a position that you want to be in, maybe in a position in life that you'd want to be in. Take their advice. Don't get relationship advice from an adult who's been married, divorced, that kind of thing. Unless you want to know what the wrong thing to do is. But get advice from people who have are really good at relationships. When you go to get married someday, don't go to someone and try to get advice from one of your friends who's never been married. Ask someone who's been married, for advice on stuff like that. Don't ask, most of your friends, they don't know any more about relationships than you do. But you get better advice from an adult who's been through all those kind of things. Not just for being married, but for whatever. Don't ask, if you're wanting to buy a house someday, ask someone who's bought a house. If you're looking for an apartment, ask someone who's lived in an apartment. Well, what kind of things should I look for? If you need job advice, ask someone who's good at holding down a job. Don't ask somebody who gets fired or jumps to a new job every 3 or 4 months. There's lots of people who do that. Ask someone who can stay at a job for a few years, when you're needing job advice. Now, at this point in the story, I'm sure that I'm sure that Saul is wishing, man, I wish I'd listened to Samuel all those times before. That's what he's probably wishing he had done when Samuel was alive. So he goes to talk to Samuel after Samuel's died. Look at verse 12 with me, and we'll finish up. When the woman saw Samuel, this is like ghost Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice, and she said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." And the king said to her, "Do not be afraid. What do you see?" The woman said, "I see a ghostly figure coming up out of the earth." "What does he look like?" he asked. "An old man wearing a robe is coming up," she said. And then Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. Now, I've been thinking about this story for years and years. I've been reading it, trying to understand it. I'm still not 100% convinced if this was actually like a ghost of Samuel or if this was a demon trying to trick him. I'm still not 100%. Well, I'm sure this really happened, but here's the reason I think it might not be Samuel. Just one small reason. And I'll go ahead and tell you, most people think this was actually Samuel, as a ghost or a spirit. A ghost and a spirit is kind of the same thing. Most people will say, well, this was actually Samuel. So I'm telling you that. I'm probably wrong about this, but in some versions of the Bible, it'll say that when this happened, that I bolded that word, knew, when then Saul knew it was Samuel. Sometimes it says knew. Sometimes in some versions of the Bible it says perceived. It says, then Saul perceived that it was Samuel. And that's always just made me think, well, maybe it wasn't Saul actually seeing Samuel. Maybe he just perceived that it was, his perception was that it was Samuel. Maybe that was what the Bible was trying to tell us. But I'm not sure. The thing I'm really skeptical about is there's nowhere else in the Bible that someone who's a ghost or someone who's died comes back as a ghost. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the Bible. So that's why I'm not entirely sure what to do. But most people say that it really was Samuel. And really in the story, he behaves as if it actually, do you have something to say? Well, he resurrected. Yeah, Jesus died and rose again, but he wasn't a ghost afterwards. But yeah, that's a good point. There are lots of people who came back after they died, but they came back in their physical body, This wasn't like that kind of situation. But that's a good point, though. Okay, so anyway, the thing is, why a lot of people think this actually is Samuel, everything that he says here comes true. Everything that Samuel says is truthful. So this is what he says. Well, first, verse 15, Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" So he doesn't even like being disturbed in this way. Do you ever think about that? Like all those people who did get brought up in the Bible, Lazarus gets raised from the dead. Do you think he was like, "I was enjoying my time in heaven"?
About to take his first bite.
Yeah, about to take his first bite in heaven. Suddenly, pop, he's back on. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. It doesn't say what Lazarus felt about, how he felt about getting raised from the dead. But, when someone does die and they go to heaven, I'm sure in some way that maybe they miss us, but they would much rather just wait for us to go to heaven someday. Like, we would just want them back. But really, they're way happier. They probably would not want to come back if they could, because heaven is so wonderful. I'm not saying they don't miss you, but they can be patient for you, because they're in a much better place. It's not just something we say. They're in a better place. Okay, let me turn to the last part of the verses here. "I am in great distress," Saul said. "The Philistines are fighting against me. God has departed from me. He no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams. So I've called on you to tell me what to do." Then Samuel said, "Why do you consult me now that the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy? The Lord's done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David." He's saying David's going to be the next king. "Because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites," that's what we talked about last week, "the Lord has done this to you today. The Lord will deliver both Israel and you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also give the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." And immediately Saul fell full length on the ground, filled with fear because of Samuel's words. So what Samuel says is, Saul, you brought me up out of the dead, but nothing has changed since the last time we talked. He just repeats the same stuff he said to him the last time they had a conversation, which we were talking about last week. He says, nothing's changed except for one thing. Now you're going to die tomorrow. That's what he tells him. And Saul does die the next day. That's what I'm saying. Everything that he says comes true here.
Well, how would Samuel know that?
He just knew. Because because he'd been in heaven or whatever. He just knew this. Maybe he heard.
Because you're in heaven doesn't mean you know.
Well, maybe God told him. Everything that Samuel says here, Samuel was a prophet anyway. God would tell him things that were going to happen in the future. But anyway, Saul did die the next day. I don't know if it was because he did this. This was bad, going to a medium. I don't know if that's why he died or not. I'm not really sure. But what I want to look at is it said... Saul really died the next day. Yeah, he got killed in a battle. It says that Saul fell full length on the ground. He fell full length. And why does it say he fell full length? Why would it bring that up? It's talking... the reason it brings that up, his full length, is because every time that it talks about Saul, it talks about how tall he is. That's what it always would say about Saul. Saul was the tallest man in his whole family. Saul was tall and good looking. That's what it would always bring up about him. Does he remind you of anyone that you know maybe? He said he was really tall and a handsome guy. But in his last story, tall Saul falls full length on the ground. And what I just want to close with, he was falling down because he'd been humbled. He just had nothing left. And there's two ways that we can get humbled. We can humble ourselves, or God can humble us. And neither one of them are fun. Let's just be honest. Neither one of the ways that we get humbled are fun. But out of the two ways, it's much better if you humble yourself than if God has to do it for you. God will do it for you. But it'll be a lot easier if you just humble yourself. And, not just, we can come to the conclusion on our own that we're Mr. Perfect, Mrs. Right, Mrs. Perfect, Batman, whatever. You can think that about yourself if you want. But you can either humble yourself or God can humble you. And I'd rather do that for myself than have God do it. Let's pray here, and we'll close up. I'm glad you guys are here tonight. I hope something out there. We talked about 3 or 4 different things, but I hope that something was beneficial for you. So let's pray and we'll close up. God, thank you for tonight and that we can come here, hear from your word, hear this story that's just very different from all the other stories in the Bible. But I know that you have everything in the Bible for a reason. You have something in there to teach us. And I hope we learned something tonight. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.